My presentation today is about contract analytics in auditing. I work with Professor Kevin Moffitt and also as well as Professor Miklos Vazaheli on this project. So a basic introduction about this paper we've been working on is we first identify that contracts are extensively used by auditors in 3 steps, where in the planning and risk assessment, in the compliance and substantive testing, and in review. These are based on the review examination of auditing standards. And also in May 2014, where the FASB issued the ASC 606, mainly it's because where it requires, when companies try to recognize revenue from contract, it requires the company to look into the specific details of contracts. And therefore, this will increase the burden for contract examination for both the internal and external auditors. So when auditors look at contracts, they typically focus on these significant contracts, like, for example, CEO compensation contracts. So these types of contracts, they have significant impact on firms' financial statement. And usually auditors do so by borrowing power or having power from a legal specialty like a lawyer. So a lawyer will help auditors to examine the full contracts and see if they can identify anything suspicious or anything will be identified as red flag. However, as we can see, on the contrary of significant contracts, we also have these insignificant contracts, or we say that contracts associated with low perceived risks, such as the sales contracts, insurance policies, or lease agreements. So this thing you'll probably see a lot in your daily life. When I just renewed my insurance policy yesterday, so at that time, a new contract has been generated by the system. So they are usually large in quantity, you'll see a lot of them, and they have few customized contents where they are generated by template, filling information into a template. And also for some small and medium-sized firms, they store that as hard copy or scanned image, meaning we need to use some OCR, like the technique Ben talked about, to convert from PDF to text. And also, each individual contract represents low risk, meaning if you try to read one of them, because for the insurance premium amount, for me, it's very a kind of low amount. So even the risk associated with that specific contract can be very low as compared to a CEO compensation contract. So what currently auditors are doing with these types of insignificant contracts, they are doing that in 2 ways. They're handling that in 2 ways. First is they can do a sampling, meaning they just take a small portion of that large number of population and try to perform audit procedures on the sampling. However, in a long time ago, literature has pointed out that samples may not represent full population accurately, and some risk may be only detectable when in aggregation. So on the other hand, auditors say that they can rely on the record from the company's ERP system. For some large companies, some large like insurance companies, they actually store all the data in their ERP system. And auditors say, I can just rely on their ERP's data so that I can get all the numbers in this contract. So that if doing so, this implies that auditors are assuming that the record in the ERP systems are correct, meaning, but we know that the numbers of the ERP system, the correctness of the numbers in the ERP system rely on the effectiveness of the internal control, where how people put numbers in the system. Therefore, if there's a way for auditors to examine the original contract documents, this will provide a higher level of assurance as audit evidence. So in this, under this scenario, we propose that we can use natural language processing, a way that is based on machine learning, that we can use computer to actually analyze textual information. So there's been a lot of development in the natural language processing, which actually open up these opportunities for auditors to use this type of techniques to examine populations of contracts. In addition, this text mining or natural language processing has attracted attention of accounting researchers It has been used to flag questionable financial disclosures and assess fraud risk. And also it has been used to analyze the management discussion and analysis section to identify firms that encounter fraud or bankruptcy. And also researchers argued that the result of text mining can be a valuable complement of traditional audit evidence. So borrowing from the technology process reframing theory, when there's a disruptive technology appears, the professionals, in this case auditors, should reconsider methods and process adopted in this area. So with this text mining appearing, we argue that auditors should reconsider how they handle contracts and how the way they audit, especially those insignificant contracts. So in this paper, we identified the gap in literature that the notion of auditing the entire population of contracts has not yet drawn the attention of researchers. And also in this paper, we first proposed a framework called Contract Analytics Framework, in which we will incorporate text mining techniques to contract-related auditing, and we demonstrate a way to obtain audit evidence from the entire population of high-volume similar contracts. In the second part of this paper, we implement the proposed framework on a set of reinsurance contracts as a case study. So moving to next is our proposed framework. So you can see in this contract analytics framework, we can separate them into 4 big categories. So in the first category, we have document management. In this part, we will be importing contracts into the computer or the system. So the first step, contract importing, is where we take in all the different types of contracts, whether they are in Word or PDF or different format. So if it is stored as a page, picture format in PDF, we'll be using the OCR techniques to recognize text on the picture, and then we'll perform a document classification. It can be it is to categorize the contracts, whether it's based on where its originality, where it's from, and the name of the contract, or it can be classified based on the keyword, extracted keywords, or topic generated by machine learning. And finally, in this step, we also generate an abstract using text summarization techniques, so that when later auditors find something, when they go back, they need to look at specific contracts, they can first look at this abstract and then determine whether these contracts contain something they really want. So once the contracts have been imported in the system, next, what we will do is a content identification. So at this part, the computer does not know what it is about for each contract. So what does this text mean or the words mean? So the way we further process this contract is try to tag term and clauses with those specific information taggings. For example, in the sales contract, we'll tag the number of sales, the quantity, we'll tag sales amount, we'll tag sales price, and also any late payment terms. So all those terms and clause will be tagged with information about their things they are going to say. So in this way, we tag all the sentence and clause or terms and clause in the contract with different taggings, so that we can perform an information extraction. For example, we want all the premium amount of this sales contract, we can just use that tag to extract the information. So that's how information extraction is done. So in this way, in the first 2 steps, we have identified there's some commercialized software that can do that. So with this extracted information, we further propose that auditors can use them for the following audit task. First is cutoff testing, where we deal with this log analysis. We have the data information. We can determine whether this contract should be inside this period or should be classified as next period. Or when there's a negotiated contract, auditors should reconsider to revisit or re-examine this contract. Second, record confirmation with the data we extracted from from the contract, we can verify that with a third party. So in this part, we can use a robotic process automation to automatically send confirmation to the third party. Also, we can validate the record extracted with the database of the company's ERP system. And finally, because previously we dealt with the variables, the numbers, or the data that's changing in the contract, now in this contract, we have this, in the insignificant contracts, we have large parts of template. So in this part, we verify whether the template has been modified. So there are two ways. First, if the contract is generated by just filling in boilerplate, we can determine using document similarity to determine whether the template itself has been modified. Or in the second scenario where there's like a pool of template, we have general terms and clauses that are used in, let's say, a sales contract, and a specific contract just use some portion of that. So we can, in this case, we use a corpus-based similarity measurement to determine whether this specific contract contains terms that are very unique, that did not appear in other contracts. So with the result from the previous three steps, we can apply that to get additional audit tasks to aid, for example, the evaluation of error or fraud, to do a risk assessment of compliance and litigation, and finally for the substantive tests where the result can also help. So with the proposed framework, we also try to map this framework into the auditing standards in United States. So there's a lot of text here, but I'll provide a summary to that. Is basically what you see here in the planning and risk assessment step, and also in the review step. Our framework mainly serve as the way to extract information, because in this step it's more like high level decision. So auditors can use our framework to extract information and examine manually. Now, the main part that we think our framework has the full capability to assist is in the compliance and substantive test procedure, where when auditors need to examine contracts and examine contents that are written in contracts, our framework has the can be used to its high capability. So the second part, we apply what we proposed in the framework to 10 reinsurance contracts or for the case study. So the sample we get is from a client from one of the big 4 audit firm, and we have 10 reinsurance contracts. They are large contracts with a lot of words, and they are similar contracts, meaning they are created using template. So you have a template, you just fill in numbers or data into the template. They come from PDF image format. So we have the same issue with BAN. We need to convert them into text. So to further provide a full view of our framework, we set sample number 1 as the template. So we'll just assume that the number 1 contract is our template, and we manually embedded 2 arrows in sample number 2, where we just move 1 paragraph from one page to another page. And we add another reinsurance agreement from a different template as sample number 11. Okay, so first is a document management. In this step, just remind you, we import contracts from different sources to the computer, and then we do a document classification. So we use the OCR engine to convert image to text. And although we encountered some errors there, but we'll talk about that later. And then once the contracts are all imported in the computer, we use a term frequency and inverse document frequency, TF-IDF, and cosine similarity score to classify these contracts. So this term frequency, a TF-IDF, and cosine similarity score is a machine learning algorithm that's currently used to determine the similarity between two corpus of text, so 2 documents or two groups of text. So we can compare so for each contract, we just compare the similarity of each contract to the template, sample number 1. So sample number 1 comparing to itself is 100% similar, so they are the same. So as we go in here, we compare contract number 2, sample number 2 to sample number 1. So we see that it has almost 99.958%. So we can continue the process. We observe a very high similarity score between sample number 2 to sample number 10. However, for the number 11, where we obtain a reinsurance agreement created from another template, the similarity score decreased to 32%. Therefore, we identify number 11 does not belong to this group. So if auditors find that the client include this one in the same group of contract they send to them, this can be a red flag. So in the following analysis, we just exclude sample number 11 here because it does not use the same template. Then we move to our content identification, which is the second part. In this part, we try to tag information. So the way we do that is through regular expression. We first manually identify audit-related variables on the template contract number 1, or sample number 1. So we find that policy number, premium amount, or period of insurance, and other variables that are of the auditor's interest, and we identify them. And then we use this regular expression to match the pattern of those variables. In that way, we can just extract the variables with its regular expression patterns. So regular expressions are sequence of characters that describe the pattern of set of strings. So in simple words is when we have email address, we have some text, then add some website dot, like for schools will be .edu, for website will be .com. So we can write regular expression to match the pattern of the email of the email address, and then we can use that pattern to extract all the text that match this kind of patterns. So our result is shown as following. We have 10 reinsurance contracts. So we extracted this result, and we manually reorganize that in Excel and present you this table here. So first, we look at the date information, the log analysis, the cutoff. So we don't have further information of all the different, like the period of the insurance. So we kind of look at the outliers. So we have 3 NA here. So NA means we didn't identify anything. There's a blank part on that contract. So 3 reinsurance contracts are missing the period of insurance. Then for the retroactive date, we only observe like this one date only appear once. Others, they appear multiple times. As for the record confirmation, we just also try to identify any missing value and outlier. So we find that there are some policy number missing, gross premium amount missing for the first one, and for the gross premium amount for the third one, its outlier is much higher than all the other contract. So this may also raise the concern of auditors. So we just demonstrate this on the 10 sample. However, if there are thousands of sample here, we'll do the same thing, and it will be the same procedure, just adding like seconds more time for the computer to process the data. Okay, so finally, the last step we will be doing is to verify whether the template has been modified. So if you remember, these contracts are created by template, feeding information into template. And the way we do the template analysis is we do a page-by-page similarity analysis. Meaning, if we are looking at here, gray diamond for sample number 3, we compare each page on sample number 3 to its corresponding page on the template number 1, sample number 1 here. So you can see this similarity score here represents a page-by-page similarity. And for the gray diamond here, sample number 3 represents a normal contract. its similarity score is almost 100%. And if we look at this orange dot here, sample number 2, we actually see some interesting finding. We have 2 outliers here. So if you recall that in the sample, I manually embedded 2 arrows. I moved 1 paragraph from page 3 to page 15, and we were able to identify this arrow here. But we also identify an outlier for sample number 10, this blue triangle here. This, we manually check what's happening. It's because the arrow of OCR converting. Sometimes the capital C and capital G, when computers try to recognize capital C as compared to capital G, sometimes it's confusing because the low quality of the image may lead the computer to recognize, to kind of mix these two letters, and that's why we have a low similarity score here for sample number 10. And finally, we have this also for the sample 5, 7, and 9. They have a very strange pattern here. They are very different from our first sample. However, these 3 contracts different in the same way. So we went back to our sample to see what's happening in these pages. So we actually identified that it is due to the low quality issue. As you can see here, these texts here are tilted, and they are separate into 2 columns. The format is not matched by the OCR. Therefore, we have encountered this error where, you know, it just mixed the format. It recognized some text into other page, the wrong page with the wrong page number, so that they are recognized wrongly in the same way. And this is not a screenshot from my sample data. It's something I just obtained from Google, and don't sue me on that. All right. Yeah. So in conclusion, in this paper we propose this framework to incorporate natural language and text mining, natural language processing and text mining techniques to auditing, and we implement this framework to an illustrative sample of reinsurance contracts. So we believe this study helps to incorporate text mining techniques in auditing procedure, and our proposed framework can help auditors to free auditors from repetitive contract examinations. So for the future work, we want to add more sample data, and we also want to, you know, add functions that can handle handwritten content in the contracts. And finally, the low quality of this PDF could impact our results, meaning we have observed that our result has been significantly impacted by the low quality of the images. And thank you for listening to my presentation, and that's all.